America, and welcome to another Founders Friday on the Glenn Beck program. Somebody asked me just before we went on the air how these shows are being rated, and I have to tell you, we didn't think anybody would watch. We thought, we'll give this a whirl, see if everybody wants to watch it. They're wildly highly rated, and I thank you for watching. There is a hunger in America for the truth, and tonight, I think we're going to blow your mind. You're going to have to ask yourself a couple of questions by the end of the program. Why would our schools leave all of this history out? I mean, this is some of the greatest American story that you've ever heard. Why would they do that? And it's everywhere. You just don't know where to look. If you take a look at the revolutionary paintings of revolutionary times, here it is. This is a Boston Tea Party. Bunch of white guys, and these people strangely looking like Indians, and they're not. But that's it. Not a lot of racial diversity. If you watch movies, one great movie. This is John Adams. You watch John Adams, and you don't see a lot of racial diversity. I'm currently watching Johnny Tremaine. This is. I love this movie. I remember this growing up. I was watching it with my kids just last night, and I noticed there are a couple of American Indians, but you don't see any African Americans unless they're slaves. They will show people as slaves, but that's it. Now, I want to show you a painting of the Battle of Bunker Hill. Here's the Battle of Bunker Hill. Bunch of white guys, right? Unless you know where to look. Right here. That's Peter Salem. He was actually the hero of the battle. It doesn't look like he's a hero there. He looks like he's cowering behind the white guy with a sword. He was the hero of the battle. And he saved scores of American lives that day. Why don't we know this? Look at the picture of the Battle of Lexington. 150 Americans. There it is. Do you see any faces of color in this painting? They were all members of the Reverend Jonas Clark's church. They went out. They were actually, if I'm not mistaken, David, they were in church at the time, right?
He called them together at church,
okay,
yes.
So we called together at church and then said, let's go! And they went to defend their town. When the shot heard around the world was over that day, there were 18 Americans lying on the ground. What you don't see in this painting are the equal numbers of whites and blacks. They were white and black patriots. It was a mixed church. Did you even know that happened? One of those injured patriots on the ground in this painting was a black man named Prince Estabrook. I bet you never heard of Prince Estabrook before. How about the painting of George Washington crossing the Delaware? Bunch of white guys, right? No. Look here. African American, helping row the boat across. You know what his name was? Prince Whipple. He fought alongside Washington during the Revolution. Take a look at this one. This painting of, this is the Marquis de Lafayette. If you look at this, you just think, oh yeah, and then he made his slave dress up like I don't know what. But that's what you would think, right? This guy is incredibly important. This guy may have won the Revolutionary War. James Armistead was his name. How did he win the Revolutionary War? Double spy. I'm going to let David tell the story here in a minute, but basically the Brits thought that he was spying for them, but he was spying for General Washington. He'd give the Brits bad intel and reveal the good critical information to General Washington. Did you know this story? Why? I'm so tired of people saying, well, it was just the white people, white people, white people. No. No. Why are we intentionally leaving others out? There are black founders. Let me ask the audience. How many of you can name one person of these pictures? Only one. How many can name only one? Most people, right? Am I mistaken in saying it's Frederick Douglass? Okay. How many can name two of the people here? We've got 6, 8 people. How many can name 3? 4. How many can name 4? 1. And that's David Barton's wife. David, come on up. This is our good friend David Barton. He is the founder and president of Wall Builders, also author of Setting the Record Straight, American History in Black and White. Come on up and sit here. We also have Lucas Morrell. Lucas is a professor at Washington and Lee University in Virginia. Welcome. And he is also the author of Lincoln's Sacred Effort. Okay. David, where do we start? Maybe we should start with
James Armistead.
Yeah, the spy.
It's a great one, because James Armistead, after the Battle of Richmond, he's in Virginia, and a lot of the battles do not happen in Virginia. But after the siege of Richmond, he's there. He sees what the British have done in his home state, and he goes to enlist. He said, "I want to help." And he really, I don't know why, but he liked Lafayette. He went to Lafayette, young French general, 19 years old, said, "I want to fight with you." And so they make this agreement, and what happens is James Armistead goes over to Benedict Arnold's camp. He's a British general then, traitor British general. And he says, "Oh, these mean Americans, they mistreat me. I've escaped as a slave. Please let me stay with you." And Arnold says, "Okay, you can wait on us." And so he is part of Benedict Arnold's staff, waiting on Benedict Arnold. And Arnold's one of the generals, which means he meets with all the other generals. So he's meeting with Cornwallis all the time. And so James Armistead is just serving them and doing all the right stuff and just picking up intelligence like crazy. Every day he gets back with Lafayette, says, "Here's what they're doing. Here's where they're going. Here's what they're going to do next." And he kept feeding the information back. And Cornwallis in this time got really comfortable with James and said, "You know, I don't want to ask you to do something you don't want to do, but would you consider being a spy against your former guys there, the Americans? Would you be a British spy and tell us what they're doing?" He said, "Yeah, I guess if you want me to, I will. You know, if you're going to force me to, I will." So he goes back.
It'd be tough getting across the lines, though, but I'll risk it.
Yeah, I'll try it.
Right.
So he ends up saying, "Yeah, I'll do it." And what happens is when they leave Richmond, they decide that they're going down to Yorktown, and they're going to go down there. So what happens is Armistead's fed all that information to Washington and Lafayette. They're going to Yorktown. And he's let the British know that, oh, there's no Americans around down there. It's a real safe place to go. The Americans are elsewhere. So the British the British fleet drops the soldiers off in Yorktown, and the fleet takes off because there's no Americans around. Right then, the French fleet came in and blockaded the port, so the British couldn't get their ships back. And now we've got all the American troops waiting for them when he got up. They're pinned in on the peninsula. Can't go anywhere. So he probably cut months, maybe years off the revolution by what he did. Now, it's really cool. He liked Lafayette so much that he went back and got his name changed legally from James Armistead to James Lafayette. He loved Lafayette. And so Lafayette left America in 1784, went back to France. He came back here in 1824 for his farewell tour. Last time he's going to be in America. He's an old man. There's a painting of Lafayette that hangs inside the House chambers, the U.S. Congress, of Lafayette, the old man, on his farewell tour. And everywhere Lafayette went, there were hundreds of thousands of Americans lining the roads. When he went through Richmond 40 years later, he looked over and spotted his old friend James right in the crowd. Picked him out, called him a name. They went and hugged and embraced, and it was really cool.
Why do we not know this story, because really, you talk to African Americans, and they'll say, "Well, I mean, I think I had Al Sharpton say this to me. Well, you give me somebody like Rosa Parks up there. He said this about these three gentlemen.
Yeah.
You get rid of all the white guys. You give me somebody like Rosa Parks up there. Why don't you have any color there?" And that's what prompted this show. There is. Why leave people like this out?
Let me give you an example of how well we used to know this. You know, the painting you showed of Washington crossing the Delaware, this little jewel right here. You mentioned that this is Oliver Cromwell, and he is. But up here are Prince Whipple, but the other one's Oliver Cromwell. There's actually two blacks in the front of that boat, and they served not as slaves. They were free men who served with Washington on the general staff throughout the Revolution from start to finish. Now, this painting that you showed was done in 1851 by a German, and it was done in Europe. It wasn't done in America. It was done in Europe to show the Europeans, here's what the American Revolution looked like, which meant back then we knew blacks were involved, whites were involved. At the back of the boat, there's actually a lady dressed up in men's clothes.
Yeah, put this back up. Put the George Washington crossing the Delaware over, because I find it interesting because I looked into the history of this as well.
See, they believe what he did was. Go ahead and point it out.
I heard this is the lady, but who are you saying?
Right there, right there. That's the lady.
Right here.
Right there.
Yeah,
and
okay.
The two guys up front, the very front guy, Oliver Cromwell, and you pointed to Prince Whipple behind him. There. I mean, this was done to show Europe, hey, here's what America did in the Revolution.
Right.
Everybody came together. We don't show that today. I mean, it used to be that we knew. This book right here is an old textbook from 1855. It's a great book. It's written by a black historian, a first black appointed federal office. It's called The Colored Patriots of the American Revolution. Now, we studied that as a textbook. That is not a skinny little book that we have there. I mean, there's a lot of patriots in the American Revolution that we studied. This book right here is an old textbook from 1855. It's a great book. It's written by a black historian, a first black appointed federal office. It's called The Colored Patriots of the American Revolution. Now, we studied that as a textbook. That is not a skinny little book that we have there. I mean, there's a lot of patriots in the American Revolution that we studied. Black patriots.
I read the book, Giants, and was just amazed at this man. Frederick Douglass. Incredible guy. We don't really even know. Most people can say, I think the audience would say, yeah, I can recognize, I know that's Frederick Douglass, but you're not really sure. He looks kind of just like a black Alexander Graham Bell. I mean, you're like, I don't really know his story, I think. Am I right saying that or not? You kind of know him, but you're not sure why.
Right.
Tell his story.
We've got a movie about Malcolm X. Right? Movies about Martin Luther King Jr. And for some reason in American history, we think that the only time blacks stood up for their rights was when Martin Luther King decided to leave the pulpit and hit the stump, hit the stump to make speeches. The bottom line is, for the longest time, we've adopted this victim narrative about blacks in the United States, that the only role they played was a victim to white majority oppression. When I teach my course on Black American politics, I always stress to my students that when we talk about King and the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s, we need to call it the modern civil rights movement, because blacks from before the revolution were prudently pressing for their rights. American history could be described as one long civil rights struggle. Our first Emancipation Proclamation, Declaration of Independence.
Right.
That's right.
It's been this way. It's going on now. It's going on. It's people trying to grab others' rights, and that never changes. That's human history. That's human history. If I ask the audience, when did America have its first African American judge? What year would you say? Anybody? Take a guess. Judge. 1860s? Anybody? 1770. Amy, is that just a wild guess?
No, not. I wasn't sure exactly, but I think it's about
1770. Tell me.
1768. Wentworth Cheswell, New Hampshire, elected to office in New Hampshire. He was reelected for the next 49 years, held 8 different political positions. Really cool story about him is we all know that Paul Revere made his midnight ride. We also know he wasn't the only guy riding that night. Another guy riding, Wentworth Cheswell, black and white riding.
Now, how is it possible? Did you know that we had an African American ride to say the British are coming, the British are coming? Amy did. Amy did. Anybody else besides Amy know that? 2, 3. Okay, 3 people in the audience. He was such a great guy, and we never hear about him because he rode north and Paul Revere rode west. And Revere was going after Reverend Jonas Clark's church because that's where Hancock and Adams were, was him. And that's where we had blacks and whites, as you pointed out, laying on the ground after that battle. Wentworth Cheswell rode north telling people the British are coming. And it was from the north that all those people came to Boston to take on the British at Bunker Hill and everywhere else. So we don't hear about his ride because the British went west, and that's where all the action happened. But it was a couple of days later when all these people started coming down from New Hampshire and Vermont and elsewhere, and that's where he had ridden, telling them what was up. Lucas, when we come back, I want to take a quick break. And when we come back, I want you to tell me a little bit about about Frederick Douglass.
Sure.
You know, the opening of Giants is so captivating, where you see a man who has struggled, who was kept. I mean, it sounds horrible to say, but kept in, I guess, nice slavery, if there's such a thing, How would you describe how he...
Well, he didn't grow up as a slave in the deep South, the deep cotton states. So,
Right.
I mean, the phrase being sold down the river, that has an actual historical connection. To be sold down the river was the worst thing because you went from something pretty bad to awfully bad.
Right, okay.
So a slave in Maryland is not as bad as being a slave down in the Delta.
And what happened to his family where he was originally held? Because they sold him.
They sold him. He never knew his siblings. Met his mother, or had vague memories of his mother maybe a few times. He remembers her calling him my little Valentine, and that's why he dates his birthday February 14th, but he doesn't have a birth certificate. He doesn't know when he was born.
Okay.
We think February 1818.
Okay, so he was in, a slavery that was northern slavery, but then he was sold into horrible, horrible conditions, and he witnessed for the first time somebody's whipping him, and he's like, whoa, 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 what is this all about? And it wasn't too much longer that he's sitting and having a conversation with Abraham Lincoln because he was so impressive. We'll tell you that story coming up in just a second. You are going to learn more about our founders and the role that African Americans played in the founding of this country in the next 15 minutes than you probably have learned your entire life. Back with me is David Barton, founder and president of Wall Builders, and Lucas Morrell. He is a professor at Washington and Lee University in Virginia. I want to go back to Frederick Douglass here because Frederick Douglass actually was very upset at our founders because he said, I'm not just 3/5 of a human being, I'm a full human being. This is an argument that is used even today that Frederick Douglass corrected.
Yes.
Tell me the story.
What happened was after he escaped in 1838, he ended up in New York. In New York, he gets discipled by a lot of anti-slavery folks, and that's the Lysander Spooners and Gerrit Smith and William Lloyd Garrison, etc. And Massachusetts society hears him do his testimony, and they said, oh man, you got to speak for us. Well, in the meantime, they're saying, you know, you need to overthrow the Constitution because the Constitution is a slavery document. The founders gave us slavery in the document, and there's all these clauses of slavery. And he believed that. But bless his heart, when the Massachusetts Anti-Slavery Society said, we want to pay you to go on the road full time, he said, okay, I got to make sure I know this stuff. So he sat down and read the Constitution for himself, not just what the guys had taught him. He read it himself, and he read the documents surrounding it, the debates going around it. And he comes out with this epiphany and says, this is a great anti-slavery document. And he says, every clause in it. You go, whoa, time out. How can the 3/5 clause be an anti-slavery clause? Real easy. He read the convention notes. What happened was you had all these anti-slavery founding fathers. You had, for example, James Wilson. You had Elbridge Sherry. You had Luther Martin.
Ben Franklin.
All these guys, all these anti-slavery guys. And you had 3 hardcore southern states that were pro-slavery. There's Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina. And so the Constitution says every 30,000 inhabitants you have, you get a representative to the House of Representatives. And in South Carolina and Georgia, there's more blacks than there are whites, and they're slaves. And they said, great, every 30,000 slaves we've got, we'll get another member of Congress. Guys up north said, no, 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 we're not doing that. If you want to count them, you free them. Every free person you have, you can get 30,000, you can have, and they said, no, no, we're going to count this, or we're not going to be part of these United States. So this debate goes back and forth, and what's really funny is the guys in the South said, you know, blacks are property. I love
they're not people.
They're not
people, but they want to count them as people.
And see, the guys in the North said, no, every black is equal to a white. We're all created equal. You get 30,000 free blacks, you get a member of Congress. And that was the incentive to free blacks. It was, you get to count them for Congress. So the guys up north started having fun with the guys down south. They said, you know, you guys say that blacks are property. And Elbridge Gerry did this, and Luther Martin did it out of Maryland. They said, okay, here's what we're going to do up north. Is you're counting 30,000 pieces of property, get a member of Congress. We're going to count 30,000 chairs and horses and cows. We'll count our property. Every 30,000 pieces of property we get an anti-slavery member to Congress. So they went back and forth on this thing, and what they finally ended up was the 3/5 clause that says, okay, we will count 3/5 of the slave population, not individuals, which meant you now had to have 50,000 before you could get a pro-slavery rep to Congress. The 3/5 clause cut the slavery representation in Congress in half. And when Frederick Douglass read that, he said, the 3/5 clause, that has nothing to do with the worth. That has to do with the representation. It makes it harder to get a pro-slavery representative in Congress the Constitution's an anti-slavery document.
was.
And it was.
It was.
And
That's
it was
why they
Frederick
changed.
Douglass who points that out.
The original document for the Declaration of Independence was life, liberty, and property.
And property.
Property.
That's right.
The reason being, they changed it. They changed it to pursuit of happiness because they didn't want the South to say, ah, ha, ha,
That's right, the South.
You got chairs, we've got people. By the way, all of these people here, most people, these pictures, most people cannot identify them, but they all played a role in the founding of our nation or the refounding of our nation. These people are now in the textbooks because of Texas, because of what happened. These people, they fought to put these people in. Why would the left fight to put these people in?
Let me go back to the picture we had earlier of the Battle of Bunker Hill.
Okay.
So if you take that picture of the Battle of Bunker Hill, and this is a painting that was done in 1817, and the guy who did this, John Trumbull, did this painting. John Trumbull was at the Battle of Bunker Hill. He's the guy who drew the maps for Washington, what went on. Over here on the right, we have Peter Salem. Now, he had 14 military commendations that day. He is the hero. They brought him in front of George Washington to get special honors from the commander-in-chief.
He's the guy standing behind the white guy with the sword.
That's right. Now, the white guy with the sword is Thomas Grosvenor. So you have Thomas Grosvenor and you have Peter Salem, black and white, fighting side by side. But Peter is definitely the hero that day. 1817, this painting is done, and all the way up until the 1980s, we knew that that was Peter Salem, the hero of Bunker Hill. 1980s, the professors got together and said, oh, no, that's not Peter Salem. We think that that's Grosvenor's slave. Now, the white guy with the sword is Thomas Grosvenor. So you have Thomas Grosvenor and you have Peter Salem, black and white, fighting side by side, but Peter is definitely the hero that day. 1817, this painting is done, and all the way up until the 1980s, we knew that that was Peter Salem, the hero of Bunker Hill. 1980s, the professors got together and said, oh, no, that's not Peter Salem. We think that that's Grosvenor's slave is who that is. It's not Peter Salem.
Oh, you're kidding.
No, in the 80s, they changed that from Peter Salem to Grosvenor's slave, Asaba. And that's what they say, oh, no, it's not Peter, it's Asaba, Grosvenor, it's his slave. How come the guy who painted it and the guy who was there and the guy who saw it and painted what he saw had him as Peter Salem, and now we've all convinced, oh no, it's just like, because we're into this thing of the founders have got to be evil, we got to make every effort we can to make them evil, we got to make victims and everything. These guys weren't victims. They were courageous Americans who won the battle, and we can't afford to say that. That'd make America look good.
When did America have the first Speaker of the House?
1789.
Wow. Details next. Founders Fridays. This is lost history in America, and you need to preserve it. Back with me now is David Barton, founder and president of Wall Builders, and Lucas Morrell, professor at Washington Lee University in Virginia. We're going to get to some questions in the audience here in a second. First, one thing that I think is missing in America, and it is the key to America, has been the difference between individual rights and collective rights. And this man articulated that.
In a speech entitled Our Composite Nationality, Frederick Douglass said, I know of no rights of color superior to the rights of humanity. He thought the worst thing that could happen for blacks after the Civil War was to treat them as exceptions in the law. And so today, with the discursive logjam that we have over things like affirmative action and group rights, and the only thing that you get from government is if you ally with others who look like you or somehow are categorized like you.
This goes into your theory that this is why this is not being taught, because you can't play the victim card. If you don't...
It goes against the traditional victim narrative. After the Civil War, the history was actually written by the losers. That's the one time in history where the losers wrote the history.
That's exactly right.
Really interesting perspective.
That's exactly right.
All right, David, explain quickly. Let's go through these people.
Let's go through these. This guy right here, this is Limuel Haynes. Limuel Haynes is a soldier in the American Revolution. He's a black preacher. He's the first black preacher ordained in America that was a pastor of a white congregation in Vermont, Massachusetts, New York, several places.
A black professor in
black
a
preacher,
white...
That's right, in a white church.
Yeah, black minister.
Black minister in a white church in 4 different states. He was ordained in the Congregationalist denomination in 1785. He's the first black to receive a master's degree in America. He got that in 1804 from Middlebury College. So Limuel Haynes, every year on Washington's birthday, he preached a special sermon about George Washington, his commander-in-chief, in all of his churches where he was.
Unbelievable.
So we don't hear about Limuel Haynes. This is Benjamin Banneker. I think he's the most brilliant scientist in American history. This guy,
Wow.
unbelievable what he did. He's the guy
More so than Franklin?
I would put Franklin and Banneker almost equal. Now, Franklin
Holy
did a
cow.
lot of inventions. This guy one time took a pocket watch. He taught himself how to read. He taught himself science. He wrote an almanac that 10 years ahead he was able to predict to the minute solar eclipses, lunar eclipses, 10 years before they happened. I mean, by watching the motion through a telescope, unbelievable what the guy did. He once took the back off a pocket watch, saw how it worked, went home, and carved a wooden clock with all the gears, mainspring, and it was accurate to within 1 minute a year. A wooden clock the guy did.
Cow.
He's the guy who laid out Washington, D.C. He's the surveyor who did all that. He's a brilliant mathematician. Jefferson gave him...
Never knew this.
No. Jefferson gave him an example to France, said, hey, you guys in France think that blacks are inferior? Here's Benjamin Banneker.
Okay, I have
Jefferson
2 minutes total, so
okay,
quickly
right
there, and then we have one
right
more.
here, James Armistead. We talked about the first double spy, really cool guy. This is Richard Allen. He's the first founder of a black denomination in America. He is a soldier in the American Revolution. He actually is the first guy to practice medicine, taught by signer of the Declaration, Dr. Benjamin Rush. Just a really cool story.
Okay.
So really cool.
All right, good. Now tell me.
Here to these guys.
Now let's take the full of the first representatives. I asked, when did we have our first black Speaker of the House? When did we have the first Speaker of the House? 1789. When did we have our first black Speaker of the House? I bet most people would say never.
Never, except it was right here. Joseph Haynes Rainey. Joseph Haynes Rainey of South Carolina is first black to preside over the House of Representatives. These are the first 7 blacks elected to Congress. You have here Senator Hiram Rhodes Revels, the first black U.S. Senator elected. He was a minister of the gospel. He was a missionary. He worked with Frederick Douglass. He recruited 3 regiments of black soldiers in the Civil War, and he was a missionary to slaves in the South. You have here Benjamin Turner, Josiah Wall, DeLarge. This guy right here is really cool. Robert Brown Elliott is probably the most brilliant guy of that era. He actually took on the vice president of the Confederacy in a debate on the floor and just tore his head off. The racist Alexander Stephens. It was a great debate.
When did we turn? Were these guys proud Americans, or did they say
this is the epitome of what we were just talking about. These were individual guys. Half of these guys taught themselves to read. Half of these guys were slaves, and 5 years later they're sitting in Congress. And as slaves, it was a capital offense to learn to read. So these guys in 5 years, and I'll guarantee you read their speeches and records of Congress, you better have a dictionary and a thesaurus in both hands, because you want to understand the language they use. It is so brilliant what these guys did.
But were they there to say the white man is bad and the America is bad?
No.
And
these guys were Richard Allen. Let me go back here. Richard Allen had been in slavery. Richard Allen was in slavery, and he held no bitterness at all. He says God would not allow bitterness even in Joseph when he was in prison. Do you think God will allow it in us? He said, we can't have bitterness. He said, by the way, there were some whites who held us in slavery, but it's whites who are working for our freedom. I mean, these guys had no bitterness. They wouldn't allow it.
Back in just a second. Is an easy book for you to read that will answer a lot of the questions. American History in Black and White by David Barton. Available at Wall Builders, also Amazon.com and everything else. Yeah, grab it now. David Barton is here, founder and president of Wall Builders. Lucas Morrell, professor at Washington and Lee University in Virginia. Deneen has a question in our audience.
Yeah, when did this rich history get erased from the textbooks?
Lucas hit it. The losers wrote the history. I mean, that's exactly what happened. Was the loser wrote. You really set something, put it together for me, because my viewpoint was, and you're going to love this. This is red meat for you. Woodrow Wilson changed the teaching of history. So
I hate that guy.
Woodrow Wilson, when he came into office, he took every black in office in federal government and kicked them all out except one. He left one black in office. He is the first guy. He
resegregated the army.
He resegregated. He's the first guy to show a film at the White House, and the film he showed was Birth of a Nation, a Klan recruiting film.
He called it History Written with Lightning.
That's right.
The NAACP, to their credit, boycotted that movie.
That's right. So he's the guy who wrote the 7-volume History of the American People. And that is the set that suddenly became the whole basis of the way we started teaching 20th century history. It's racist.
Oh, it's awful.
But he has a PhD.
Bingo.
Rafiq.
Can you please explain to the audience that Texas is working to put this in their history books, is not trying to take out black history as the hype propagated by the media?
Yeah, the media doesn't like what we're doing. I was one of the 6 guys appointed in Texas to help oversee the writing of the standards, one of the experts, and we got every one of these guys back in, and it drives the left crazy.
Back in.
Yeah, back in. Back in. And you know, I love what you said, too, about groups versus individuals, because if you look at the American Revolution, not only was it black and white, guess what? We had a lot of Hispanic heroes as well. And it is such a good group. And the national motto is E pluribus unum. Out of many, we became one. And we have tried for 20 years to make it E unum pluribus. Out of one, we're going to be all these groups. And
right.
It's back.
Yes.
Good.
Well, what is the motivation behind not disseminating this information? What's the motivation behind the left or whoever it is that doesn't want this information put into the textbooks?
Well, their mentality is that you get what is secure if government gives it to you. The Declaration of Independence says your rights are not the gift of government. You are born with them. You are endowed by your Creator with these.
That's right.
Government exists to protect what you already possess. That is counter 180 degrees to what the typical statist approach to government exists.
It really is slavery again. And you just start with the easiest to enslave, but it eventually ends in all of us being
It's a
enslaved by the
plantation
government.
mentality.
Yeah. Okay. Justice, go ahead.
How have these revelations of the Black Founding Fathers personally affected your viewpoints on the American government and society today?
I have to tell you, I didn't grow up in the civil rights movement. I grew up in Seattle, Washington, and so I've always kind of just approached it as everybody's, you know, hey, everybody has a fair shot. And I was one of your more uninformed people on planet Earth. In learning about the founders and seeing the heroes that were involved, it only strengthens my view that this was a divine document, the Declaration of Independence, that these guys really did struggle, just like in any society at any time. Bad guys, good guys. There were some real dirtbags. But for the most part, these guys were amazing, and they struggled in their time to do the right thing. You say that they're not Christians. They were Christians, and they fought for people who weren't. The same thing with, they were all white. Well, they fought for people who weren't. It was a confusing time, but an amazing time. Thanks. Back in a second. I was just thinking about Justice's question before the break, and the other thing that I've learned is I'm really hacked off because there are amazing people that have been forgotten. Remember them from New York. Good night, America.